"And what about mommy, Daddy?" the little girl asked her father, seeing the female millionaire CEO crying inside her Cadillac. "Before we get into it, let's make this moment global. Leave a comment in your own language." "Daddy, why is the lady crying in her fancy car?" 7-year-old Emma Thompson pressed her small face against the rain-streaked window of their old Honda, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at the gleaming black Cadillac pulled over on the shoulder of Highway 95. Inside the luxury vehicle, a woman in an expensive business suit sat hunched over the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking with what were clearly desperate sobs. Mike Thompson glanced over at his daughter, then at the Cadillac. His weathered hands gripped their car's steering wheel tighter. 3 years since the divorce, and he was still learning how to answer Emma's endless questions about the world's pain. The custody arrangement meant he only had her every other weekend, and moments like these reminded him how much he'd missed, how much he was still figuring out about being the father she deserved. "Sometimes, sweetheart, even people who seem to have everything can be very sad," Mike said, his voice gentle but carrying the weight of his own recent struggles. At 35, the construction foreman had learned that money didn't shield anyone from heartbreak. The woman in the Cadillac suddenly looked up, and Mike caught a glimpse of her face through the rain. She was probably in her early 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair now disheveled, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Despite her obvious distress, there was something striking about her, an elegance that even tears couldn't diminish. "Should we help her, Daddy?" Mike hesitated. His ex-wife Sarah had always criticized him for being too trusting, too willing to get involved in other people's problems. But looking at Emma's concerned face, he realized this might be one of those teaching moments he'd been reading about in those parenting books. "What do you think we should do, Em?" Emma bit her lower lip, a habit she'd inherited from him. "Mommy says we should help people when they're crying. Remember when Mrs. Patterson's cat died and Mommy made her soup?" Mike smiled despite himself. Even after their bitter divorce 2 years ago, Sarah had done a good job instilling kindness in their daughter. He pulled over behind the Cadillac, hazard lights blinking in the October afternoon drizzle. "Stay in the car, okay? Lock the doors." As Mike approached the Cadillac, he could hear the woman's muffled sobs through the partially open window. She looked up when his shadow fell across her car, and he was struck by the raw vulnerability in her green eyes. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman, whose nameplate on the dashboard read, "Victoria Sterling, CEO," wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing expensive concealer. "I'm fine, thank you. Just having a moment." But Mike had seen enough pain in his own mirror to recognize it in others. "My daughter noticed you were upset. She's worried about you." Victoria's gaze shifted to the Honda, where Emma's small face was pressed against the window, her eyes wide with concern. Something in that innocent expression seemed to crack Victoria's composed facade all over again. "She's beautiful," Victoria whispered, fresh tears spilling over. "Thank you. She's got a big heart just like her mom." Mike paused. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but if you need someone to call, or somewhere safe to go." Victoria Sterling laughed bitterly, gesturing at her car's opulent interior. "I have everywhere to go and no one to call. Funny how that works." The rain was getting heavier, and Mike was getting soaked, but something about this woman's pain felt familiar. It reminded him of those first nights after Sarah left, when the house felt too big and too empty, when success at work meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. "Would you like to get some coffee? There's a diner about a mile ahead. Sometimes talking to a stranger helps." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, taking in his work boots, his honest face, the way he kept glancing back at his daughter with protective concern. "I don't even know your name." "Mike Thompson, that's Emma." He gestured toward the Honda. "And something tells me you could use a friend right now, Mrs. Victoria Sterling." She took a shaky breath. "And yes, Mr. Thompson, I think I could use a friend." The Riverside Diner hadn't changed in 20 years, which was exactly why Mike liked it. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and coffee that could wake the dead. Emma slid into the booth next to him, her coloring book already open, giving Victoria space to sit across from them. Victoria looked completely out of place in her $1,000 suit among the truckers and shift workers, but she didn't seem to notice. She wrapped her manicured hands around the heavy ceramic mug as if it were a lifeline. "I buried my mother today," Victoria said quietly, staring into her coffee. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis, too." She couldn't finish the sentence. Mike felt his chest tighten. "I'm so sorry. The funeral was this morning. Perfect service, beautiful flowers, catered reception. I planned every detail because that's what I do. I fix things, I make things perfect." Victoria's voice cracked. "But I couldn't fix her, and now she's gone, and I realized I have absolutely no one left who actually cares about me. Emma looked up from her coloring book, her 7-year-old wisdom somehow sensing the adult pain even if she couldn't fully understand it. My grandma died last year. Daddy cried too. Victoria's eyes filled again. Did he? Uh-huh. He said it's okay to be sad when someone you love goes to heaven. Mike squeezed Emma's hand gently, remembering that awful day when his mother passed. Sarah had been so cold about it, complaining about the funeral expenses, the time off work. It had been one of many signs that their marriage was already over. Emma's right, Mike said. Grief doesn't care how successful you are or how much money you have. It hits everyone the same way. Victoria studied Mike's face, noting the genuine kindness there, the way he spoke to her without judgment despite their obvious differences in social status. What do you do, Mike? Construction foreman. I build things. Houses, offices. Sometimes I tear old buildings down to make room for new ones. He shrugged. Not exactly glamorous, but it's honest work. You know what's funny? I'm CEO of Sterling Industries. We develop luxury residential properties, high-end commercial buildings. I've probably approved projects that you've worked on. Emma perked up. Daddy builds really pretty houses. He showed me pictures. Victoria smiled through her tears, the first genuine smile she'd managed all day. I bet he does, sweetheart. What about your family? Mike asked gently. Husband? Kids? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. I was married. Richard. 15 years. He left me 8 months ago for his 28-year-old assistant. Said I was married to my work, that I'd become cold and distant. She laughed bitterly. Maybe he was right. I put everything into building the company after my father died 10 years ago. Sterling Industries was his legacy, and I was determined to make it bigger, better, more successful than he ever dreamed. She paused, watching Emma carefully color inside the lines of a butterfly. We tried to have children for years. 7 miscarriages. 7. The doctor said it was stress, that I needed to slow down, but I couldn't. There was always another deal, another project, another crisis that only I could handle. Mike reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Victoria, that's not your fault. Isn't it? Richard said I chose the company over having a family. He said I chose success over love, and maybe he was right. When the divorce was finalized 6 months ago, I threw myself even deeper into work. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I told myself it was worth it, that I was building something meaningful. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. But when my mother was dying, when she asked me about grandchildren, about whether I was happy, I couldn't answer her. And today, standing at her graveside, I realized that all my success, all my money, all my achievements mean nothing if you have no one to share them with. Emma had been listening intently, and now she slid her coloring book across the table to Victoria. You can color with me. It makes me feel better when I'm sad. Victoria looked down at the open page, a picture of a family holding hands in front of a house, and something inside her shattered completely. She began to sob again, but this time Mike didn't hesitate. He moved to sit beside her in the booth, wrapping his arms around her as she cried into his shoulder. It's okay, he murmured. Let it out. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. And for the first time in years, Victoria Sterling allowed herself to be vulnerable, to be held, to be human. 3 weeks after that first meeting at the diner, Victoria found herself doing something she never thought possible, sitting on the bleachers of Lincoln Elementary School, watching Emma's soccer game on a crisp November Saturday morning. She's got good instincts, Victoria said, cheering as Emma stole the ball from an opponent. Natural athlete. Mike grinned, his breath visible in the cold air. Gets that from her mom. Sarah played college volleyball. The mention of his ex-wife still stung a little, but not as much as it used to. Victoria had been calling Mike every few days since that afternoon at the diner, and somehow their conversations had evolved from her grief counseling into something that felt suspiciously like friendship. She'd never had a friend like Mike, someone who listened without trying to fix everything, who offered comfort without expecting anything in return. Mike, can I ask you something? Victoria turned to face him, her designer coat looking out of place among the other parents in their jeans and team sweatshirts. Shoot, why did you stop to help me that day? You didn't know me, and I must have looked like a complete mess. Mike was quiet for a moment, watching Emma high-five her teammates. About 3 years ago, right after Sarah left, I was having the worst day of my life. I just signed the divorce papers. Emma was crying because she didn't understand why Daddy wasn't living at home anymore, and I was sitting in my truck in the Home Depot parking lot, wondering how I was going to handle being a single dad. He paused, remembering. This old guy, probably 75, knocked on my window. I was crying like a baby, and he just asked if I was okay. Turns out his wife had left him 30 years earlier and he recognized the look. We talked for 2 hours. He told me that the pain would get better, that being a good father was worth any sacrifice, and that sometimes God puts people in our path exactly when we need them. Victoria felt her throat tighten. What was his name? Frank Patterson. Lives about 6 blocks from me. Still calls to check on Emma and me every few weeks. Mike looked at Victoria with those kind brown eyes that had first drawn her in. I guess I figured maybe you needed someone to knock on your window. Emma scored a goal and both adults jumped to their feet cheering. As they settled back down, Victoria realized she was genuinely happy for the first time in months. Not successful, not accomplished, not achieving, just happy. I have a confession, Victoria said, pulling her coat tighter around her. I've been looking forward to these calls, these little meetings, more than anything else in my week. More than board meetings, more than closing million-dollar deals. Is that crazy? Mike's smile was warm and understanding. Not crazy at all. I've been looking forward to them too. After the game, they went to Emma's favorite ice cream shop despite the November chill. Emma chatted excitedly about her goal, while Victoria found herself studying Mike's interactions with his daughter. The way he listened to every word, the way he praised her effort more than her success, the way his whole face lit up when she laughed. Daddy, can Victoria come to our house and see my room? Emma asked, chocolate ice cream smeared across her cheek. Mike and Victoria exchanged a look. They'd been careful to keep their friendship public. Diners, soccer games, school events. Victoria's house was a 12,000 square foot mansion in the hills. Mike's was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a working-class neighborhood. The contrast felt too stark, too likely to highlight their different worlds. I'd love to see your room, Emma, Victoria said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. An hour later, Victoria stood in Emma's small bedroom, taking in the hand-painted walls, Mike's work, the carefully organized books, the drawings taped to every surface. It was warm, lived in, loved, everything her own childhood bedroom had never been. Daddy painted the butterflies himself, Emma said proudly, pointing to the delicate creatures fluttering across one wall. And he built my bookshelf, and my desk, and my dollhouse. Victoria looked at Mike with new eyes. You painted these. They're beautiful. Mike blushed slightly. YouTube University. Emma wanted butterflies, so I learned how to paint butterflies. My daddy can do anything, Emma declared, and Victoria could see that in Emma's world, this was absolutely true. As they headed toward the kitchen, Victoria noticed framed photos everywhere. Emma at various ages, Mike and Emma together. Even a few pictures that included Sarah from happier times. It was clear that despite the divorce, Mike was committed to preserving Emma's sense of family history. Victoria, do you want to stay for dinner? Emma asked. Daddy makes the best spaghetti. Victoria looked at Mike, who nodded encouragingly. If you're sure I'm not imposing. You could never impose, Mike said softly, and something in his tone made Victoria's heart skip. As they cooked together, well, Mike cooked while Victoria attempted to help and Emma provided running commentary. Victoria realized this felt more like home than anywhere she'd been in years. The easy conversation, the laughter, the sense of belonging. It was everything her perfect empty mansion lacked. But as the evening wound down and Victoria prepared to leave, reality crept back in. Tomorrow she had board meetings, contract negotiations, a company to run. Mike had construction sites, work crews, a completely different life. Thank you, she said at the door, meaning more than just dinner. Thank you, Mike replied, and she knew he understood. Driving home in her Cadillac, Victoria caught herself smiling in the rearview mirror. For the first time since her mother's death, she was thinking about tomorrow with anticipation instead of dread. December arrived with an early snowstorm that shut down most of the city, but Victoria Sterling was still at her office at 9 p.m., reviewing quarterly projections by the light of her desk lamp. Sterling Industries occupied 3 floors of downtown's most prestigious building, and from her corner office, Victoria could see the city spread out below her like a glittering constellation. Her assistant had left hours ago, along with everyone else, but Victoria stayed. She always stayed. Work was safe, predictable, controllable, unlike the confusing emotions that had been stirring in her chest whenever she thought about Mike Thompson. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Mike. Power's out in our neighborhood. Emma and I are making shadow puppets by candlelight. She says to tell you the shadow bunny misses you. Victoria smiled despite herself, setting aside the contracts she'd been reviewing. Over the past month, these little messages had become the highlights of her days. Mike would send pictures of Emma's art projects, updates about soccer games, random thoughts that somehow always brightened her mood. She looked around her empty office, awards lining the walls, expensive furniture, everything perfect and cold, and made an impulsive decision. 20 minutes later, Victoria was standing on Mike's front porch, holding a bag from the city's most expensive Italian restaurant, and feeling more nervous than she had before any business presentation. Mike opened the door, his face lit by candlelight, and his surprised smile was worth every mile she'd driven through the snow. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I brought dinner. Figured you might be getting tired of peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight." Emma appeared behind her father, squealing with delight. "Victoria, did you come to see our shadow show?" The next 2 hours were unlike anything Victoria had experienced. They ate expensive pasta by candlelight, watched Emma perform elaborate shadow puppet stories, and when Emma finally fell asleep on the couch, Mike and Victoria found themselves talking quietly by the fireplace. "Can I ask you something personal?" Victoria said, curled up in the corner of Mike's worn but comfortable sofa. "Always. Do you ever regret it? The divorce, I mean. Starting over, having to do everything alone?" Mike was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I regret that Emma had to go through it. I regret that I wasn't smart enough to see the problems coming, maybe fix them before it was too late. But regret the divorce itself? No." He turned to look at Victoria, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Sarah and I wanted different things. She wanted the big house, the country club membership, the social status. She resented that I was just a construction worker, that I didn't have ambitions to be something more impressive. There's nothing wrong with construction work, Mike. You create things. You build homes where families make memories. That's more meaningful than most of what I do." Sarah didn't see it that way. She had plans for me to go back to school, get into management, maybe start my own company. When I said I was happy doing what I was doing, that I'd rather be present for Emma than chasing bigger paychecks, she said I lacked ambition. Victoria felt a stab of recognition. Richard said the same thing about me, but in reverse. He said I had too much ambition, that I cared more about success than about our marriage. "Did you?" The question hung between them. Victoria looked at Mike's honest face, at sleeping Emma, at the warm, loving home they'd created together with so little money but so much care. "I thought I did. I thought building the company, proving myself, living up to my father's legacy, I thought that was what mattered. But sitting here with you and Emma, I'm starting to think I got it all wrong." Mike reached over and took her hand. "You didn't get it wrong, Victoria. You just prioritize different things. There's nothing wrong with being successful, with being driven. The problem comes when you don't have anyone to share it with. Is that what you want? Someone to share things with?" The question slipped out before Victoria could stop it, and she immediately felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that terrified her. She was Victoria Sterling, CEO, master of her universe. She didn't ask needy questions about relationships, but Mike's thumb was tracing circles on her palm, and his eyes were warm and honest, and suddenly she didn't care about maintaining her professional facade. "I want what everyone wants," Mike said softly. "Love, partnership, someone who chooses me every day not because they have to but because they want to. Someone who sees Emma and me as a package deal and thinks that's a bonus, not a burden." Victoria's breath caught. "Mike, I know we're from different worlds, Victoria. I know you have responsibilities, a whole life that doesn't include guys like me. But these past 2 months getting to know you, seeing you with Emma, you're not the cold businesswoman your ex-husband described. You're kind and funny, and you care so deeply about everything. You just forgot how to let people see that side of you." The power chose that moment to flicker back on, flooding the room with harsh electric light. The spell of candlelight and confession was broken, and Victoria suddenly felt too exposed, too vulnerable. "I should go," she said, standing quickly. "It's late, and I have early meetings tomorrow." Mike stood too, confusion replacing the warmth in his eyes. "Victoria, did I say something wrong?" "No, it's not. I just need to think about everything." She was almost to the door when Emma's sleepy voice stopped her. "Victoria, are you leaving?" Victoria turned to see Emma sitting up on the couch, her hair mussed from sleep, looking small and confused. "I have to go home, sweetheart." "But why? Don't you want to stay with us?" The innocent question hit Victoria like a physical blow. Yes, she wanted to stay. She wanted to belong here, to be part of this warm, loving little family. But wanting something and being able to have it were two different things. "I'll see you soon, okay?" As Victoria drove home through the snow, her hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel, she tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. She had a company to run, shareholders to answer to, a reputation to maintain. She couldn't just abandon everything for a fantasy of domestic happiness. But as she pulled into her empty mansion's circular driveway, She couldn't shake the image of Emma's confused face, or the memory of how right it had felt to hold Mike's hand by the fireplace. For the first time in her adult life, Victoria Sterling was discovering that success meant nothing if you were too afraid to reach for happiness. Victoria threw herself into work with renewed intensity after that snowy evening at Mike's house. She accepted every speaking engagement, scheduled back-to-back meetings, and stayed at the office until midnight every night. If she kept busy enough, she told herself, she wouldn't have time to think about the way Mike had looked at her by the fireplace, or the disappointment in Emma's eyes when she left. But Mike's texts kept coming and she found herself unable to ignore them completely. Mike, Emma made you a Christmas card. Can I drop it by your office? Mike, saw an article about your new hotel project in the paper. Emma says you're famous now. Mike, Emma asked if you're mad at us. I told her you're just busy, but she's worried. That last message arrived on a Friday afternoon in mid-December, and Victoria stared at it for 10 minutes before calling her assistant to cancel her evening appointments. She found Mike and Emma at the ice skating rink downtown, part of the Christmas festival that Victoria had sponsored for the past 5 years but never actually attended. Emma spotted her first, breaking away from Mike's steadying hand to skate over as fast as her 7-year-old legs could carry her. Victoria, you came. Daddy said you were too busy, but I knew you'd come. Emma crashed into Victoria's legs, nearly knocking her over, and Victoria felt her carefully constructed emotional walls crumble completely. Hi, sweetheart, I missed you. The words were out before she could stop them, and they were absolutely true. Mike skated over more cautiously, studying Victoria's face. You look tired. Thanks. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear, Victoria said, but there was no real bite to it. I mean, you look like you haven't been sleeping. Or eating enough. He was right. Victoria had been surviving on coffee and adrenaline for 2 weeks, telling herself she was too busy for things like regular meals or full nights of sleep. Can you skate? Emma asked, tugging on Victoria's coat. It's been a while. Daddy will help you, he's really good at everything. Mike offered Victoria his hand, the same gesture he'd made that first day on the highway, and after a moment's hesitation she took it. Victoria Sterling, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, was absolutely terrified of falling on her face in front of a 7-year-old and a construction worker. But as Mike steadied her on the ice, his strong hands gentle and patient, she realized this was exactly what she'd been avoiding. Not just skating, but the vulnerability of being a beginner, of needing help, of being human. I've got you, Mike said softly. I won't let you fall. They skated slowly around the rink, Emma darting ahead and circling back like an excited puppy, while Christmas music played and snow began to fall gently from the evening sky. Victoria hadn't felt this relaxed in months. Emma was really worried about you, Mike said as they glided along the boards. She kept asking if she did something wrong, if that's why you stopped coming around. Victoria's heart clenched. God, no, Emma didn't do anything wrong. She's perfect. Then what happened, Victoria? That night at my house, it felt like we were finally being honest with each other, and then you just disappeared. Victoria was quiet for several moments, focusing on not falling as they navigated a turn. I got scared. Of what? Of wanting something I can't have, of disrupting Emma's life, of failing at something that actually matters. She took a shaky breath. Of not being enough for you. Mike stopped skating so suddenly that Victoria nearly collided with him. Victoria, look at me. She reluctantly met his eyes, expecting to see pity or dismissal. Instead, she saw something that made her breath catch. You are enough, more than enough. These past 2 weeks without you. Emma isn't the only one who missed you. Before Victoria could respond, Emma skated up to them, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement. Are you guys fighting? You look serious. No, sweetheart, Victoria said, reaching out to adjust Emma's scarf. We're not fighting. Good, because I have something to tell you. Emma took a deep breath, clearly preparing for an important announcement. I asked Santa to bring you a present. That's very sweet, Emma, but you don't need to ask Santa for anything for me. But I already did. I asked him to make you part of our family for Christmas. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She looked at Mike, who was staring at his daughter with a mixture of love and panic, clearly realizing that Emma had just said out loud what they'd all been feeling, but were too afraid to acknowledge. Emma, Mike started, but Victoria held up a hand. Emma, can I tell you something? Victoria knelt down on the ice, bringing herself to the little girl's eye level. That's the most wonderful Christmas wish anyone has ever made for me, but families are complicated and… Do you love us? Emma interrupted, with the directness only children possess. Victoria looked into those innocent eyes, then up at Mike, who was watching her with his heart completely exposed on his face. Yes, Victoria whispered. I do. Then it's not complicated, Emma declared with 7-year-old logic. If you love us and we love you, then you're already family. As they skated toward the exit an hour later, Emma chattering about hot chocolate and Christmas cookies, Victoria realized the little girl was right. Love wasn't complicated. It was everything else that got in the way. The question was whether Victoria was brave enough to stop getting in her own way. Walking to their cars in the parking lot, Mike caught Victoria's arm gently. Victoria, what Emma said back there. I know it's not that simple, Mike. I know there are logistics to figure out, and Emma's custody arrangement with Sarah, and the fact that we live in completely different worlds. But, Victoria looked at him standing there in the falling snow, this good, honest man who had somehow become the center of her universe, without her even realizing it. But maybe it's worth figuring out. Mike's smile was like sunrise. Yeah? Yeah. As Victoria drove home that night, she wasn't thinking about board meetings or quarterly reports. She was thinking about Emma's Christmas wish and the way Mike had looked at her when she said she loved them, and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she could have both success and happiness. But first, she had a phone call to make. Christmas morning found Victoria Sterling in an unfamiliar position, sitting on the floor of Mike's living room in pajamas and a bathrobe, watching Emma tear through wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. The past week had been a whirlwind of difficult conversations. Victoria had called Sarah first, nervous about overstepping boundaries, only to discover that Mike's ex-wife was remarkably supportive. Mike's been happier these past few months than I've seen him since before our marriage fell apart, Sarah had said during their awkward coffee meeting. And Emma talks about you constantly. If you make them happy, then I'm happy. It hadn't been quite that simple. There were logistics to work out, boundaries to establish, and Emma's schedule to consider. But Sarah's blessing had meant everything. The second call had been to Richard, her ex-husband, which had gone exactly as expected. You're dating a construction worker? Victoria, have you lost your mind? What about your reputation? What will the board think? The board will think I'm a human being with a personal life, Victoria had replied, surprised by her own calm conviction. And my reputation has never been stronger. Sterling Industries is having its best year ever. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away everything we built together for some fantasy of playing house with a blue-collar nobody. That's when Victoria had hung up. Richard's opinion no longer mattered to her, but his words had stung because they echoed her own fears. Was she giving up too much? Was she being naive? Those doubts had evaporated the moment she'd walked into Mike's house on Christmas Eve, and Emma had launched herself into her arms, squealing about how Santa had answered her wish. Now, watching Emma model the new soccer cleats Santa had brought her, Victoria realized she'd never experienced Christmas morning as part of a family. Growing up, Christmas had been elaborate but cold. Expensive presents opened in silence, formal breakfast served by staff, her parents more concerned with appearances than joy. Victoria, look, Santa brought me a princess dress, but it's got pockets for my soccer ball. Emma spun around, demonstrating the dress's practical features. That's perfect, sweetheart. You can be a soccer princess. Daddy says you used to play soccer in college. Will you teach me how to do that spinny kick thing? Victoria laughed. I think you mean a bicycle kick, and yes, I can try to teach you, though I'm pretty rusty. Mike emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee and hot chocolate, looking completely at home in his flannel pajama pants and thermal shirt. Victoria was still getting used to seeing him relaxed like this, without the slight tension he carried during their public outings. Emma, you have one more present, Mike said, sitting down beside Victoria on the floor. I do, but we already opened everything from under the tree. Mike handed Emma a small wrapped box. This one's special, from Victoria. Emma's eyes went wide as she carefully unwrapped the box, revealing a delicate gold locket. Inside was a picture of the three of them from the ice skating rink, taken by a stranger who'd offered after seeing them laughing together. It's beautiful, Emma breathed, running her small fingers over the locket. Will you help me put it on? As Victoria fastened the chain around Emma's neck, she felt Mike's eyes on her. They'd talked about this gift extensively, whether it was too much, too presumptuous, too permanent. But seeing Emma's joy made every worry disappear. Now I can keep you with me all the time, Emma said, admiring her reflection in the living room mirror. Emma, Victoria has something she wants to talk to us about, Mike said gently. Victoria's stomach clenched. They'd decided she should explain her decision today, but facing Emma's trusting face made it both easier and harder than she'd expected. Emma, you know how sometimes grown-ups have to make big decisions about their lives? Emma nodded solemnly. Well, I've made a decision about us, about our family. Victoria took a deep breath. I want to be part of your life, really part of it. But that means some things will have to change. What kind of things? Well, I'm going to keep running my company, but I'm going to work different hours so I can spend more time with you and your daddy. I'm going to come to more of your soccer games and help you with homework, and maybe sometimes you can spend weekends at my house. Emma's face lit up. You have a really big house, right? Daddy showed me pictures on his computer. I do, but you know what it's missing? What? A family to make it feel like home. Emma launched herself at Victoria again, this time knocking her completely over onto the carpet. Does this mean you're going to marry Daddy? Victoria felt her face turn red as Mike started laughing. Emma, we're taking things one step at a time. But you love each other, right? Victoria looked over Emma's head at Mike, who was watching her with those warm brown eyes that had first drawn her in. Yes, we love each other. Then you should get married. That's what people do when they love each other. It's not quite that simple, sweetheart, Mike said, scooping Emma up and settling her between them on the couch. Love is just the beginning. Marriage is a big decision that requires lots of talking and planning. Like when you plan your construction projects? Mike laughed. Something like that. Well, I think you should get married, and then we can all live together in Victoria's big house and I can have a soccer field in the backyard. Victoria caught Mike's eye and saw her own mixture of terror and excitement reflected there. Emma made it sound so simple, so obvious. Maybe that's because it was. Later that afternoon, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch surrounded by wrapping paper and new toys, Mike and Victoria sat by the fireplace talking quietly. Are you sure about this, Victoria? Really sure? Because once Emma gets attached to this idea of us being a permanent family, there's no going back without breaking her heart. Victoria looked at Emma's peaceful face, then at Mike's concerned expression. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. These past few months with you two have been the happiest I've ever been. I don't want to go back to my empty mansion and my lonely success. But what about your company, your responsibilities? I'm not giving up Sterling Industries, Mike. I'm just learning to balance it with what really matters. I've spent my whole life proving I could be successful, but I never learned how to be happy. You and Emma taught me the difference. Mike took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comforting. I love you, Victoria Sterling. I love your ambition, your strength, your incredibly generous heart that you try so hard to hide. I love that you painted your nails to match Emma's for her soccer game, and that you cry during Disney movies, and that you're brave enough to want this even though it scares you. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, both of you, more than I ever thought possible. So what happens next? Victoria looked around Mike's cozy living room, at the family photos on the mantle, at Emma sleeping peacefully among her Christmas presents. Next, we figure out how to blend our lives together. It won't be easy. We'll have to navigate custody schedules, and board meetings, and probably some judgment from people who don't understand. But Emma's right about one thing. What's that? Love really isn't that complicated. Everything else we can figure out as we go. Mike leaned over and kissed her softly, and Victoria realized that for the first time in her adult life, she was exactly where she belonged. Success hadn't brought her happiness, but love just might. As snow began to fall outside the windows, Victoria Sterling, CEO, businesswoman, and now part of a real family, closed her eyes and made a Christmas wish of her own, that this feeling of home would last forever. But even in her happiness, she had no idea that the real test of their love was still to come, and that sometimes the biggest obstacles to happiness come from the people who claim to love you most. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the hallway of Lincoln Elementary School, her heart pounding as she waited for Emma's parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Henderson, Emma's second-grade teacher, had requested to meet with both parents, and Sarah had agreed that Victoria should attend alongside Mike. Thank you for coming, Miss Sterling, Mrs. Henderson said as they settled into the tiny plastic chairs. Emma talks about you constantly. You've clearly become very important to her. Victoria felt a warm flush of pride mixed with nervousness. Over the past half year, she'd slowly integrated into Emma's daily life, helping with homework, attending soccer practices, even volunteering for the school bake sale. But moments like this still felt surreal. Emma is an exceptional child, Mrs. Henderson continued, but I'm concerned about some recent behavior changes. She's been distracted in class, asking repeatedly when you and Mr. Thompson are getting married. Mike shifted uncomfortably. We've explained that adults need time to make those decisions. Of course. But Emma seems to have created a narrative in her mind about your family becoming permanent, and she's been telling other children that Ms. Sterling is going to be her new mommy. Victoria felt her stomach drop. Has this caused problems with Sarah? Actually, Emma's mother seems supportive. The issue is that Emma has become fixated on the idea of a wedding. She's drawn pictures, planned the ceremony, even asked me if she can write about it for her creative writing assignment. After the conference, Mike and Victoria sat in his truck in the school parking lot, both processing what they'd learned. "We need to talk to her," Mike said finally. "About what?" "About how we're both terrified to take the next step even though we love each other." Mike turned to look at Victoria. "Are we being fair to her? Letting her hope for something we might not be ready for? I don't know. I just know that every time I think about walking away, about going back to my old life, I feel sick. But every time I think about marriage, about legally binding our lives together, I panic. Because of Richard? Because of failure? Because I've never been good at being someone's partner? Because what if I'm too set in my ways, too focused on work, too damaged from my first marriage?" Mike reached over and took her hand. "Victoria, you've changed more in the past 6 months than most people change in years. You've learned to put Emma first, to be present, to be part of a team. You're not the same person who married Richard. But what if it's not enough? What if 6 months from now you realize you made a mistake? What if Emma gets hurt because we rushed into something?" Before Mike could answer, his phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Mike, we need to talk." Sarah's voice was tense even through the speaker. "It's about Emma and Victoria." They met Sarah at a coffee shop near her office. Victoria had always gotten along well with Mike's ex-wife, but something in Sarah's demeanor felt different today. Cooler, more guarded. "I got a call from my mother today," Sarah began without preamble. "She's been talking to Richard." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "Richard? My ex-husband Richard? Apparently he's been asking questions about you, about your relationship with Mike, about Emma. He contacted my mother through some mutual acquaintance, said he was concerned about your judgment." "That son of a—" Mike started, but Victoria held up a hand. "What did he say exactly?" Sarah looked uncomfortable. "He implied that you were having some kind of midlife crisis, that you were using Emma and Mike to fill a void left by your failed marriage and inability to have children. He suggested that when the novelty wore off, you'd abandon them both." Victoria felt like she'd been slapped. Every insecurity she'd been carrying rushed to the surface. "Sarah, you don't believe that, do you?" Mike asked. "No, I don't. But Richard was very convincing, and my mother is now worried about Emma getting too attached to someone who might not stick around." "He has no right," Victoria began, but Sarah interrupted. "Actually, he does have a point about one thing. Emma is 8 years old, and she's been through enough disruption with our divorce. If you and Mike aren't serious about a permanent future together, then maybe you should step back before she gets hurt." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. "You want me to leave? I want you to be honest about your intentions. Are you planning to marry Mike, or are you just playing house until something better comes along?" Victoria looked at Mike, whose face had gone pale. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with months of unspoken fears and uncertainties. "I love Mike," Victoria said quietly. "I love Emma. But I won't make promises I'm not sure I can keep just to satisfy everyone else's timeline." "Then maybe Richard is right," Sarah said, standing up. "Maybe Emma does need some distance until you figure out what you want." As Sarah walked away, Victoria felt her carefully constructed new life beginning to crumble. The worst part was that a small voice in her head was whispering that maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was just a successful woman trying to fill a void. Maybe she would eventually hurt the people she'd grown to love most. "Victoria," Mike said softly, "talk to me. What if they're right? What if I'm not cut out for this? What if 6 months from now I realize I've made a terrible mistake and I destroy Emma's sense of security? Do you want to marry me?" The question was simple and direct, so very Mike. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw her own fear reflected there, but also something else: hope, love, faith in their future together. "Yes," she whispered. "God help me, yes, but I'm terrified." "Good," Mike said, surprising her. "I'm terrified too. That means it matters to us." As they drove home to explain to Emma why there might be some changes in their routine, Victoria realized they'd reached the first real crisis of their relationship. Richard's interference had forced them to confront the question they'd been avoiding. Were they brave enough to choose love over fear? The answer would determine not just their future, but Emma's as well. 2 weeks later, Victoria sat in her lawyer's office staring at the custody documents Sarah had filed. The papers requested a temporary restriction on Victoria's contact with Emma until the adults could establish a stable long-term arrangement. "She can't do this," Victoria said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "She doesn't have the right to keep me away from Emma." Her attorney, Margaret Chen, looked grim. "Technically, she does. You have no legal standing in Emma's life. You're not a step-parent, not an adoptive parent, not even engaged to her father. In the eyes of the law, you're just Mike's girlfriend. The words stung because they highlighted Victoria's own reluctance to fully commit. She'd been so afraid of rushing into marriage that she'd left herself completely vulnerable. What are my options? Realistically, you need to either step back completely or move forward with marriage plans. Sarah's petition specifically states that she's not opposed to Emma having a relationship with you if you become her legal stepmother, but she's concerned about the instability of an undefined relationship. Victoria left the lawyer's office feeling defeated. She'd spent her entire career making strategic decisions, but when it came to her personal life, she felt completely out of her depth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Emma keeps asking where you are. I told her you were busy with work, but she's getting suspicious. We need to talk. They met that evening at the park where they'd first taken Emma to play after meeting at the diner. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 8 months. She cried herself to sleep last night, Mike said without preamble. She thinks you don't want to see her anymore. Victoria's heart shattered. Of course I want to see her. I miss her so much I can barely function. Then what are we doing, Victoria? Are we going to let Sarah and your ex-husband dictate our lives? Are we going to let fear win? It's not that simple, Mike. If we get married just to satisfy other people, if we rush into something we're not ready for, who says we're not ready? Mike interrupted. We've been living like a family for months. We've navigated holidays, homework, soccer games, bedtime stories. We've handled Emma's questions about her place in your life, my concerns about your work schedule, your fears about being a stepmother. What exactly are we waiting for? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching children play on the swings while their parents chatted nearby. Normal families, she thought, with normal problems. I'm waiting for the guarantee that I won't mess this up, she admitted. I'm waiting to feel confident that I can be the wife you deserve and the mother Emma needs. I'm waiting to stop being terrified that I'll choose work over family when the pressure gets intense. Victoria, look at me. She turned to face him, seeing the man who had become her anchor, her safe harbor, her home. There are no guarantees. Sarah and I thought we had guarantees, and look how that turned out. But you know what I've learned? Love isn't about guarantees. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when you don't know what the future holds. But what if we get married and it's the best decision we ever make? What if Emma gets the stable, loving family she deserves? What if you discover that you're exactly the mother you were meant to be? What if we stop being so afraid of failing that we miss out on succeeding? Victoria felt tears streaming down her cheeks. I love you both so much it terrifies me. Good. That terror means you understand how precious this is, how much it matters. Don't let Richard's poison make you doubt what you know in your heart is right. That night, Victoria sat in her empty mansion, looking at the photos on her phone, pictures of Emma's soccer games, family dinners at Mike's house, lazy Sunday mornings when they'd all pile into bed to read stories together. When had she started thinking of Mike's modest house as home instead of this palace she'd worked so hard to afford? She thought about her mother's dying words. Are you happy, Victoria? Really happy? For 8 months, the answer had been yes. She'd been happier than she'd ever imagined possible. But happiness required courage, and courage meant taking risks. Victoria picked up her phone and sent a text. Mike, can you and Emma meet me for breakfast tomorrow? I have something important to ask you both. His response came immediately. Yes, Emma will be so excited to see you. Tell her I'm excited to see her too. And Mike, I love you. I love you too. Always. As Victoria finally drifted off to sleep, she wasn't thinking about board meetings or quarterly reports. She was thinking about a little girl who'd asked Santa to make her part of their family, and a man who'd taught her that love was worth any risk. Tomorrow she would stop being afraid of happiness. Tomorrow she would choose love. Victoria's hands were shaking as she parked outside the small jewelry store downtown. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights researching engagement rings, wanting something that would be meaningful to Mike without being ostentatious. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, one of the most powerful businesswomen in the city, was nervous about proposing to a construction foreman. But this felt more important than any deal she'd ever negotiated. Can I help you find something special? The elderly jeweler asked as Victoria studied the displays with uncharacteristic uncertainty. I need an engagement ring, Victoria said, then paused. Actually, I need 2 engagement rings. The jeweler raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Victoria had decided that if she was going to propose, she wanted Emma to be part of it. The little girl deserved to know that Victoria wasn't just choosing Mike, she was choosing their family. An hour later, Victoria sat at their usual table in the Riverside diner. the small jewelry boxes burning a hole in her purse. Emma bounced in her seat, chattering excitedly about seeing Victoria again after 2 weeks of forced separation. I missed you so much, Victoria. Daddy said you were super busy with work, but I knew you'd come back because you love us. Victoria's throat tightened. I did miss you, sweetheart. More than you can imagine. Mike studied Victoria's face across the table. You look like you have something on your mind. I do. Victoria took a deep breath, channeling the confidence that served her so well in boardrooms. Emma, Mike, these past 8 months have been the best of my life. You've taught me what family really means, what love looks like in action, what it feels like to be truly happy. Emma's eyes grew wide, sensing something important was happening. I know there have been complications lately, people questioning whether we're serious about our future together. I want to answer that question right now, in front of both of you. Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out the 2 small boxes, setting them on the table. Emma gasped. Mike Thompson, Victoria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You are the kindest, most honorable man I've ever known. You've shown me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that builds companies, but the kind that builds character. You've taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. She opened the first box, revealing a simple but elegant platinum band. Will you marry me? Mike's eyes filled with tears as he stared at the ring, then at Victoria's hopeful face. Victoria. Wait, I'm not finished. Victoria turned to Emma, opening the second box to reveal a small heart-shaped pendant on a delicate chain. Emma Thompson, you asked Santa to make me part of your family, and that's exactly what I'm asking for now. If your daddy says yes, will you let me be your stepmom? Will you help me learn how to be the best mother I can be? Emma launched herself across the table into Victoria's arms, nearly knocking over their coffee cups. Yes, yes. I knew you'd want to be my real mom. Through her tears, Victoria looked at Mike, who was staring at them both with an expression of pure love and amazement. You're proposing to me, he said wonderfully. I am. I know it's unconventional, but nothing about our relationship has been conventional. I spent weeks being afraid to take this step, afraid I wasn't good enough, afraid I'd fail at being a wife and mother. But I realized that fear was just another form of selfishness. She reached across the table and took his hand. Mike, I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't sometimes work too late or struggle with putting family first. But I can promise that I'll choose you and Emma every single day. I can promise that I'll love you both with everything I have. Mike picked up the ring with trembling fingers. This is really happening. Only if you say yes. Mike slipped the ring onto his finger and it fit perfectly. Yes, Victoria Sterling, I'll marry you, we'll marry you. The other diner patrons had started paying attention to their table, and when Mike kissed Victoria across the table while Emma cheered, the entire restaurant burst into applause. When can we get married? Emma asked, bouncing in her seat. Can we do it tomorrow? Can I wear my princess dress? Can we have the wedding in Victoria's big backyard? Victoria laughed through her tears. We can get married whenever you want, sweetheart. But first, we need to call your mom and let her know. She's going to be so happy. She told me yesterday that she hoped you and Daddy would stop being scared and just get married already. Mike raised an eyebrow. She said that. Uh-huh. She said grown-ups sometimes need longer to figure out what kids already know. Victoria shook her head, realizing they'd been played by an 8-year-old and Mike's ex-wife. How long have you all been planning this? We weren't planning anything, Mike said, grinning. We were just waiting for you to stop being afraid of what you wanted. As they walked to the parking lot, Emma skipping ahead with her new necklace sparkling in the sunlight, Mike caught Victoria's hand. You know this means you're stuck with us, right? Soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, bedtime stories, teenage drama when she gets older. I'm counting on it, Victoria said, meaning every word. And you know Emma's going to want to plan every detail of this wedding, right? It's going to be chaos. Victoria looked at her new fiancé and her soon-to-be stepdaughter, these two people who had transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. Bring on the chaos, she said. I'm ready for all of it. But as they drove toward Sarah's house to share their news, Victoria had no idea that her announcement would trigger a chain of events that would test their new engagement in ways none of them could have predicted. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting Victoria from sleep. Mike's name on her phone screen made her instantly alert. He never called this late unless something was wrong. Victoria, I need you to meet me at General Hospital. Emma's been in an accident. Victoria's blood turned to ice. What happened? Is she okay? She was staying at Sarah's tonight, car accident on the way home from Emma's dance class. Sarah's banged up, but okay. Emma. Mike's voice broke. She's unconscious, they don't know how bad it is yet. Victoria was dressed and in her car within 5 minutes, her hands shaking as she navigated the empty streets. This was exactly the scenario that had terrified her most. Something happening to Emma, the possibility of losing this child who had become the center of her world. She found Mike in the hospital waiting room, still in his work clothes, looking lost and terrified. Sarah sat nearby, her arm in a sling, tears streaming down her face. "Any news?" Victoria asked, sitting beside Mike and taking his hand. "They're running tests, CT scan, x-rays." The other driver ran a red light and hit Sarah's car on Emma's side. Mike's voice was hollow. She was unconscious when the paramedics arrived. Victoria felt her chest tighten with panic, but she forced herself to stay calm. Mike and Sarah needed her to be strong right now. "She's going to be okay," Victoria said firmly. "Emma's tough. Remember how she bounced back from that soccer injury last month? She's a fighter." Sarah looked up through her tears. "Victoria, I owe you an apology. All that stuff with the custody papers keeping you away from Emma. I was letting other people's fears make me doubt what I could see with my own eyes. Sarah, this isn't the time." "No, it is the time. Because if something happens to Emma, I want you to know that she loves you. She talks about you constantly, shows everyone that necklace you gave her, brags about how her stepmom-to-be is a real CEO." Victoria's composure cracked. "I love her too. So much." They sat in silence for what felt like hours before Dr. Martinez appeared, still in scrubs. Victoria's heart stopped as she tried to read his expression. "Emma has a concussion and some bruised ribs, but the CT scan looks good. No brain bleeding, no broken bones. She's going to be sore for a while, but she's going to be fine." The relief was so overwhelming that Victoria actually felt dizzy. Mike buried his face in his hands and Sarah started crying again, but this time from relief. "Can we see her?" Mike asked. "She's awake now, asking for her daddy and her Victoria. 2 visitors at a time." Victoria hesitated. "Mike, you and Sarah should go first. You're her parents." "Victoria," Sarah said, standing up carefully. "You go with Mike. I need to call my mother anyway, let her know Emma's okay. Besides, Emma specifically asked for both of you." Walking into Emma's hospital room, Victoria was prepared for the worst. But Emma was sitting up in bed, looking small and pale but unmistakably herself, with a big bandage on her forehead and a hospital gown covered in cartoon bears. "Victoria, Daddy, I knew you'd come." Victoria rushed to the bedside, fighting back tears. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" "My head hurts and my tummy's sore, but the nurse said I can have ice cream for breakfast if I'm good." Emma reached for Victoria's hand. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Victoria admitted. "I don't know what I would have done if something serious had happened to you, but I'm okay. And guess what? The doctor said my necklace might have protected me. It didn't break or anything." Victoria looked down and saw the heart pendant she'd given Emma still hanging around her neck, somehow undamaged despite the accident. "That's because it's magic," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's full of love, and love protects the people we care about most." Over the next 2 days, as Emma recovered in the hospital, Victoria barely left her side. She canceled board meetings, delegated urgent decisions to her assistant, and for the first time in her career, put everything else aside to focus on what truly mattered. On the second night, as Emma slept peacefully and Mike dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair, Victoria stood at the window looking out at the city lights. She thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, successful but lonely, driven but empty. That woman would have been devastated by this experience, not because she loved Emma, but because she wouldn't have had Emma to love. "Daddy?" Emma's sleepy voice broke the silence. "Is Victoria still here?" "I'm right here, sweetheart," Victoria said, returning to the bedside. "Good. I had a scary dream that you went away because I got hurt and you didn't want to deal with hospital stuff." Victoria's heart clenched. "Emma, listen to me. I will never, ever leave you, because things get difficult. When people love each other, they stick together through scary times, through hurt times, through all the times. That's what families do. Promise?" "I promise. You're stuck with me forever, whether you like it or not." Emma giggled weakly. "I like it. I love you, Victoria. I love you too, baby girl, so much." As Emma drifted back to sleep, Mike reached over and squeezed Victoria's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For being exactly the mother she needs. For proving that love isn't about biology or legal papers. It's about showing up, staying put, and choosing each other every day." Victoria looked at this man who had taught her what real love looked like, at the child who had shown her what unconditional love felt like, and realized that sometimes it takes a crisis to show you what you're really made of. She'd passed the test. They all had. And now nothing would ever shake her faith in their family again. 3 months after Emma's accident, Victoria stood in her master bedroom closet staring at 2 wedding dresses. The elaborate designer gown she'd originally chosen seemed ridiculously formal now, while the simple cream-colored dress Emma had picked out felt perfect. "You're overthinking this," Sarah said from behind her. Over the past few months, Mike's ex-wife had become an unlikely ally and friend. "Emma's right about the dress. It's you. Elegant, but not pretentious." Victoria turned to face Sarah, still amazed by how much their relationship had evolved. "Are you sure you're okay with all this? With me marrying Mike, officially becoming Emma's stepmother?" Sarah smiled. "Victoria, watching you during Emma's accident showed me everything I needed to know. You love her like she's your own child. That little girl is lucky to have two mothers who adore her. Two mothers who occasionally disagree about bedtimes and sugar intake," Victoria added with a laugh. "The best kind," Sarah said. "Emma needs to see that women can be strong and independent and still work together when it matters. You and I are giving her a pretty good example of that." A knock on the bedroom door interrupted them. "Victoria, are you decent? I need to show you something important." Emma's voice was full of excitement. "Come in, sweetheart." Emma burst through the door carrying a small wrapped box, her face glowing with 9-year-old pride. "This is for you, for your wedding day." Victoria carefully unwrapped the box to find a delicate bracelet made of painted wooden beads, clearly Emma's own handiwork. "I made it in art class. Mrs. Patterson helped me with the hard parts. See, this blue bead is for when we met you crying in your car, and this green one is for when we went ice skating, and this red one is for Christmas morning." Victoria examined each carefully painted bead as Emma explained its significance, realizing the child had created a timeline of their relationship. The last bead was white with a tiny heart painted in gold. "And this one is for today when you marry Daddy and officially become my stepmom." Emma bounced on her toes. "Do you like it?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist. "Emma, this is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. I'll wear it every day to remember how we became a family." "Really? Every day? Every single day? It's perfect." An hour later, Victoria walked down the aisle of the small chapel, her heart full as she saw the faces of everyone who mattered. Mike's construction crew filled 2 rows, along with colleagues from Sterling Industries who had become genuine friends, rather than just business associates. Frank Patterson, the elderly neighbor who had first encouraged Mike, sat in the front row beaming. But it was Emma who stole the show, walking ahead of Victoria as the flower girl in a dress that perfectly matched Victoria's, her face radiant with joy as she scattered rose petals with dramatic flair. Mike stood at the altar in his best suit, looking nervous and handsome and exactly like the man Victoria wanted to spend the rest of her life with. When their eyes met, his face broke into the smile that had first captured her heart in that diner booth months ago. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Emma interrupted. "Wait, I have something to say first." Victoria and Mike exchanged amused glances as Emma stepped forward, clearly having prepared remarks. "Today my daddy is marrying Victoria, but she's not just marrying him. She's marrying both of us. She's choosing to be my mom even though she doesn't have to, and that makes her extra special. Victoria, thank you for wanting to be part of our family. I promise to clean my room without being asked and to not put my soccer cleats on your fancy couch." The chapel erupted in laughter, and Victoria felt her heart overflow with love for this remarkable child who had taught her what unconditional love looked like. The ceremony itself was simple but perfect. Mike's vows brought tears to every eye. "Victoria, you didn't just save me from loneliness. You saved me from a life without true partnership. You've shown me that love multiplies when you share it, and that the best families are the ones you choose with your whole heart." Victoria's vows were equally heartfelt. "Mike, you taught me that success without love is just expensive loneliness. Emma, you showed me that being a mother isn't about biology. It's about showing up, staying put, and loving without conditions. I promise to be the wife and mother you both deserve, to choose our family every single day, and to never take for granted the miracle of belonging somewhere." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Emma cheered so loudly that she nearly drowned out the traditional kiss. As the new family walked back down the aisle together, Victoria caught sight of her reflection in the chapel windows. She was glowing with happiness, her expensive bracelet of painted wooden beads the perfect accessory for her simple dress. At the reception, held in the backyard of Victoria's mansion, which Emma had correctly predicted would be perfect for parties, Victoria found herself surrounded by a mixture of construction workers and business executives, all celebrating together without any awkwardness. "You did good, Victoria," Frank Patterson said, appearing at her elbow with a glass of champagne. "That little girl's been bragging about her new mom to anyone who'll listen." Victoria looked across the yard where Emma was teaching some of Mike's younger cousins how to play her favorite soccer tricks, her new stepmother's diamond ring catching the sunlight as she gestured enthusiastically. "I'm the lucky one, Frank. They saved me from a life I thought I wanted, but that was slowly killing my soul. That's what good families do, Frank said with a knowing smile. They save each other. As the evening wound down and Emma finally crashed on one of the garden chairs, exhausted from being the center of attention, Mike found Victoria cleaning up champagne glasses. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, testing out her new name. "I like the sound of that," Victoria replied, setting down the glasses and moving into her husband's arms. "No regrets? About giving up the Sterling name professionally?" Victoria laughed. "I'm keeping Sterling for business, but personally, I've never been happier to take someone else's name. I'm Victoria Thompson now, wife, stepmother, and occasionally CEO when Emma doesn't need me for something more important." "Speaking of Emma," Mike said, glancing over at their sleeping daughter, "she has a surprise for you tomorrow." "What kind of surprise?" "She's written you a song, for Mother's Day, about how you're the mom her heart chose." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes again. "I don't deserve her." "Yes, you do. You've earned every bit of love that little girl has for you." Mike kissed her softly. "Ready to start our happily ever after?" Victoria looked around at the remnants of their wedding reception, at Emma sleeping peacefully in her flower girl dress, at the man who had shown her what real love looked like, and felt a peace she'd never experienced before. "I've been ready since the day you knocked on my car window," she said. "I just had to learn to be brave enough to claim it." 1 year later, Victoria Thompson stood in the kitchen of their newly renovated home, a perfect blend of Mike's cozy sensibilities and her need for space to entertain, watching her husband teach Emma how to flip pancakes on a lazy Sunday morning. "Higher, Daddy. Victoria likes them golden brown," Emma instructed, her 10-year-old authority on Victoria's preferences now well established. "Since when are you the expert on what I like?" Victoria asked, wrapping her arms around Emma from behind. "Since always. I know you like your coffee with 2 sugars. You hate when people are late for meetings. You cry during every Disney movie, even the ones you've seen 100 times, and you always eat the edges of your pancakes first." Victoria laughed, amazed, as always, by how closely Emma observed everything. "You know me pretty well, don't you?" "Duh. You're my mom. Moms are supposed to know everything about their kids, and kids are supposed to know everything about their moms." The casual way Emma said "my mom" still gave Victoria a little thrill. The adoption had been finalized 6 months ago, making their family legally official, but Emma had been calling Victoria Mom since the wedding day. "Victoria, you got a package," Mike said, gesturing toward the front hall. "Big envelope from Sterling Industries." Victoria frowned. She'd taken Sundays completely off since the wedding, delegating weekend crises to her capable management team. Whatever this was, it had to be important. The envelope contained a formal invitation and a letter from the mayor's office. Victoria read it twice before the words sank in. "What is it?" Mike asked, noting her shocked expression. "I've been nominated for Businesswoman of the Year. The award ceremony is next month." "That's amazing, you totally deserve it," Emma cheered, syrup dripping from her fork. Victoria looked at the invitation more carefully. "It's on a Thursday night. Emma, don't you have your school talent show that Thursday?" Emma's face fell slightly before she forced a bright smile. "It's okay, Mom. The talent show is just a school thing. Your award is way more important." Victoria studied her daughter's face, recognizing the exact expression Emma made when she was trying to be brave about disappointment. A year ago, Victoria would have probably convinced herself that Emma really was okay with it, that business obligations had to come first. Now she walked to the junk drawer where they kept important papers and pulled out Emma's talent show flyer. "Emma, tell me about your performance. What song are you singing?" "It's the song I wrote for you last Mother's Day, but I added more verses. Mrs. Henderson says it's one of the best original compositions she's ever heard from a student." Victoria's heart clenched. Emma had been practicing this song for months, perfecting every note, writing additional lyrics about their family's journey. There was no way Victoria was missing it for any award, no matter how prestigious. "Mike, can you call my assistant tomorrow? I need to send my regrets for the awards ceremony." "Victoria, you can't," Emma protested. "This is a huge honor." "Sweetheart, awards are nice, but they're not why I work. I work to provide for our family, to build something meaningful and to set a good example for you. But none of that matters if I'm not there for the moments that count." "But what will people think? What will your board think?" Victoria knelt down to Emma's eye level, taking her small hands in hers. "They'll think I'm a mother who has her priorities straight. Emma, I spent years chasing recognition, trying to prove I was successful enough, important enough, worthy enough. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "The only recognition that matters is the light in your eyes when you see me in the audience. The only success that counts is knowing that when you needed a mom, I was brave enough to step up. The only thing I need to prove is that I'll choose you and Daddy every single time. Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby girl, more than any award could ever mean to me. The night of Emma's talent show, Victoria sat in the front row of the school auditorium, wearing the wooden bead bracelet Emma had made for her wedding day, and feeling prouder than she'd ever felt at any business function. Mike held her hand as their daughter took the stage, looking confident and radiant in the dress they'd picked out together. Emma's song was beautiful, a heartfelt melody about finding family in unexpected places, about love that chooses rather than just happens, about how sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in ordinary moments. As her clear, sweet voice filled the auditorium, Victoria felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's my daughter," she whispered to Mike, and the words felt like the greatest achievement of her life. When Emma finished, the applause was thunderous, but what mattered most to Victoria was Emma's face as she spotted them in the audience. Pure joy, complete security, and knowing her parents were there when she needed them. Later that evening, as they celebrated with ice cream at Emma's favorite shop, Victoria's phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. The award ceremony was apparently being live-streamed, and Victoria Sterling Thompson had been announced as Businesswoman of the Year despite her absence. "Mom, you won anyway," Emma squealed, reading over Victoria's shoulder. "No, sweetheart," Victoria said, looking at her husband and daughter, at the family they'd built together through courage and love, and the willingness to choose each other every day. "I won a long time ago. I won the day I decided to knock on your daddy's car window. I won when I learned that the most successful thing you can do is love people well." Emma grinned, chocolate ice cream smeared across her cheek. "Does this mean we're all winners?" "The biggest winners in the world," Mike confirmed, pulling both his girls into a hug. As they walked to the car under the starlit sky, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 2 years ago, she'd been crying alone in a Cadillac, successful but empty, accomplished but unloved. Tonight, she was walking hand in hand with her family, carrying an award she'd won for professional excellence, but treasuring even more the knowledge that she'd learned to excel at the things that truly mattered. "Mom," Emma said, as Victoria buckled her seatbelt. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for choosing us over the fancy party." Victoria's heart overflowed. "I'm proud of me too, Emma. I'm proud that I finally learned what success really looks like." "What does it look like?" Victoria looked at Mike's loving smile in the rearview mirror, at Emma's trusting face turned up toward hers, at the life they'd built together through courage and commitment, and the daily choice to put love first. "It looks exactly like this," she said. "It looks exactly like home." As they drove through the quiet streets toward the house where they'd learned to be a family, Victoria Sterling Thompson, successful businesswoman, devoted wife, and proud mother, knew that she'd finally found the one thing that had been missing from her carefully planned life, a love worth more than any achievement, a happiness that couldn't be bought, and the peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The little girl who'd once asked why the lady was crying in her fancy car had given Victoria the greatest gift of all. She'd taught her how to stop crying and start living.